This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, also principal second violin and artistic administrator, Merwin Sue. And today we have two special guests, Douglas Tappin, who is the composer of the opera I Dream, which premieres at Toledo Opera this weekend. We also have the orchestrator and musical director of that production, Carl Marsh, here in the studio with us. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
Hello.
So the subject of our discussion this afternoon is the opera I Dream. It is opening at Toledo Opera this Friday, April 6th at 7:30 p.m. Also performances on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday evening is 7:30 p.m. Sunday afternoon is at 2 o'clock p.m. That is at the Valentine Theater. 419-255-SING is the number. That's 419-255-7464, or go online to toledoopera.org. So, for anybody who does not know the opera I Dream, based on the final hours in the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Douglas Tappin, we talked about this actually a few weeks ago at the library, and that was the first day of rehearsals for you, I remember. Tell us a little bit first about I Dream, what it's about. Give us the sort of the nutshell explanation of it for anybody who's listening who still hasn't been exposed to what's going on.
It covers about 28 years of history between 1941 1969, and is based on the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And as you said, its framing is the last 36 hours of his life. And so in the prologue at the start of the piece, he wakes up on the morning of the 3rd of April 1968. And through a series of dreams, reminiscences, and premonitions, he remembers aspects of his childhood, meeting Coretta in Boston, the beginnings of the civil rights movement in 1955 in Montgomery, and then other aspects of the civil rights movement, in touching on Birmingham, Selma, and all the way back up to the 4th of April 1968.
It's a fascinating concept that you came up with, and touching on all of these different aspects of the life and the message of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can you tell us how you came to write this piece, or how the idea came to you, and how long you spent working on it?
I grew up in the UK as someone who was very familiar with this from a distance. And it wasn't until coming to Atlanta in 2004 that the story moved me more than being something that was purely historical. If you live in Atlanta, you regularly meet people who have in some way or other participated in the civil rights movement, either family members or people who knew Dr. King, who had marched with him, or some other close familiarity. And it was their stories and then the research that I began to do that has felt like an extreme academic discipline and dissertation, because I had to prepare a bibliography for someone once, and there were like 80 different things on it listed out, journals, books, historical articles, that type of thing. But it was I suppose soaking all that in that gave me the sense that this was a story that I was meant to write, and that rhythm and blues opera eventually became the way that made the most sense to set it.
Yeah, it should be said that you wrote the libretto as well, for
Yes.
folks who don't know, as well as the music.
Yes.
And it's interesting when you talk about the dissertation or the sort of analytical side that you brought to it, because people may or may not know that you were a barrister or
Yes.
a lawyer.
Technically still am.
Good to know.
if I went back to the
So
UK
watch what you say.
and got a practicing certificate again, I technically put the wig and gown on and go back to court.
What was your... I tried that for a traffic ticket. Didn't work.
All right.
But maybe I'll bring you along next time, and we can show up in force.
Only if you want to go to jail.
Yeah. What kind of law did you study? In the UK?
I started off studying the rather broad area of contract. I had after qualifying, you do something that's like an apprenticeship, but a professional apprenticeship, and it's called a pupillage, and you have a pupil master for a period of a year.
It's kind of like being a Jedi Knight, right?
Somewhat, but without the levitation and the lightsabers.
As far as we know.
But otherwise the same.
But otherwise the same. Yeah.
We still have about 20 minutes. So.
We had, but he shocked me because there's a practitioner's book called Chitty on Contracts, and that pretty much covers everything that is contractual.
Yeah.
And so that will cover everything from banking contracts to employment contracts to entertainment contracts, and that's what he did. If it was a contract, he did it. So I started there, but then figured that wasn't a whole lot of fun because every day you were dealing with something different. But it was all about precision, and weirdly, in a way that translates into writing scripts and librettos, punctuation and grammar and words absolutely matter.
Well, it's interesting thinking of your experience as a lawyer, preparing contracts and having to come up with, succinct language that covers a lot of things with, I don't want to say as few words, because as we know, there are a lot of words in contracts.
There are.
But that experience must have played somehow into your assembling this libretto, right? Because if you're the composer and the librettist, what kind of a conversation were you having with yourself putting this together?
For me, it always begins with the story, and the libretto arises out of the story, and the music arises somewhere in the midst of that process. And so you're right; it is a conversation with yourself, and I find myself wrestling over word choices and rhyming choices and story ideas and structure the whole time. But that's why this is such a collaborative process. Beyond that, because it's not unusual for there to be a librettist and a composer, or in the world of musical theatre for there to be a book writer, a lyricist, and a composer.
Right.
And so I've worked with dramaturges and worked with Carl, who's here also, as an orchestrator as part of the process of creating this.
Well, I want to bring Carl into the discussion, but before we do that, why don't we listen to a piece of music? I have 4 different cuts here from the opera. Now, this is a concept recording, right? This is was done in Washington?
No, this was recording in Atlanta.
Oh, in Atlanta, okay.
At the end of the creative process. So following the third of 3 readings in New York, it made sense to go to a studio, and it was about 3 months or so, and over that period to record this. But it's substantially a rhythm section, so it's not the way it's going to sound here in Toledo. But this will give you a sense of it.
Gives you a taste,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, Music and Words by Douglas Tappin.
One side of me is apathy, complacent compromise. Then there are men like you with murder in their eyes. I know the way of love will break this harsh regime. That is how I dream. Somewhere beyond these white stone walls, beyond the present day, far beyond this fetid, filth-stained prison cell, I pray. Way beyond this valley of despair, where there's no hope, so it may seem, I dream. I dream all heaven's children, white and black, will live in peace. Learn to value unity, mercy will increase. Beyond this tribulation meant to silence me or make my voice mainstream. I dream of a better day than this. I dream of a wave of freedom nothing can resist, and that wave will wash all the tears and pain of this bitter day away. Wash it all away. I dream this blessed cursed nation might fulfill its founding creed, that all men are born equal with a fair chance to succeed. Diversity and harmony and rhythm, singing freedom's glorious theme. I dream of a better day than this. I dream of a wave of freedom nothing can resist, till the day justice rolls like water and love flows like a mighty stream. I will sing, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring.
Wow. What do you do after that? I mean, it just knocks your socks off. Douglas Tappin, we'd heard a cut there, the title track from his opera, I Dream. Yeah, you can write a tune.
Thank you.
We're talking with Douglas Tappin, who is the composer of the opera I Dream, based on the life, the message of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We also have the orchestrator and musical director of the production, Carl Marsh, with us. The opera opens on Friday, April 6th at 7:30 p.m., also Saturday, April 7th at 7:30 p.m., Sunday, April 8th in the afternoon at 2 o'clock p.m. It's at the Valentine Theater. You can find more information at ToledoOpera.org or at 419-255-SING. That's 7464. Well, let's bring Carl Marsh into the conversation. We heard, Carl, that version there for a rhythm section with the singer. Describe for us the process of how it goes from Douglas to you to orchestrate it, turn it into this operatic version, which is being premiered.
Well, it's there's a lot of back and forth, discussion going on, but it all starts with Douglas giving me a piano version of the section that we're targeting for the orchestration, a piano version with the libretto and with the lyric and with the melody, and from that point onward we discuss style. We discuss anything that we need to about any bullet points as far as emotional moments in that particular segment, and then I go into my lab and start scribbling away and coming up with ideas. Yeah. And I make for Douglas what is called a maquette, which is a model of what it would sound like. Okay. If it were...
You do that through a computer or through a program?
Yeah. Yes. And although I still write my scores by hand...
Wow. You're in a small group of people who still do that.
That's right. That's another whole discussion there. Yeah. But the maquette I send to Douglas, and then we talk about that. And if there are any changes that need to be made to the maquette, then we make those. And sometimes we go back and forth. You know,
Has he been fairly easy to work with?
Yes.
Never.
You have a contract attorney at the table. Of course, it's going to be yes, Brad. Yes.
I try to be.
Yeah.
I try to be all the time, and I hope I am. And the thing is that often, as has been the case here, the time pressure is so incredible.
Right.
That it's a mix for me of wanting to comment in a way that is helpful and helps it to be right, but not wanting to hold the process up.
Right.
But it's really interesting because there's some very deliberately chosen, very, very evocative instrumentation choices. So do you walk in there, Douglas, with this sense, I really want this counter melody to be oboe solo, like this, because there's some really noted or do you want I definitely, this has to be saxophones. It can't. It can't be.
Let me just put it out there. And what it sounds like to me is Douglas, you are telling Carl the kind of emotion you want to create in this moment, and then Carl's job is to find the right instruments to express that emotion.
Yeah, I think that's fair because I know when I hear it. And in fact, the other day I was sitting at the piano in the rehearsal hall playing one of the piano parts, and I realized that it was. Carl's tried to preserve exactly what I played in the piano or wrote in piano in the first place. But yeah, absolutely, the colouring of it is open for interpretation, and we do go back and forth on things. But sometimes. Yeah. I played oboe, and I love the sound of an oboe, and I love the sound of a cello, which I should have played, but I preferred to play soccer.
Wait, you can't do both cello and soccer.
Well, it's really tough to kick the ball. The cello gets in the way.
Yeah.
Or when you're playing the cello, your foot keeps twitching.
That's right.
I was 7, and one of my school teachers offered to teach me, but it would have
soccer
been
or cello. Cello.
Yeah, she couldn't kick a ball. But she was a cellist and offered to teach me if I would forgo lunch breaks for the next 4 years.
Oh no! Okay, so this was this was not a choice between soccer and cello. It was a choice between eating and cello
and friends.
Yeah.
So,
well, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to ask a question to Merwin here. So sure. We've spoken on this program before the idea that new commissions and new music being something that's kind of exhilarating but also really challenging for the orchestra because world premieres don't have any precedent. So how is it with the opera? I'd have to imagine that opening a score, for example, for the cello concerto we premiered earlier this year is one thing, but knowing that it's going to be an opera might have different considerations.
It's definitely different because I think those first readings, you're just a part of the picture, and so the first thing that you're going for is there's this real curiosity. You can't wait to have the singers there because it's built around that. So in a way, it's kind of like doing an extras rehearsal for Gladiator or something. You feel like, we know we're important. We're sure we're important. But gosh, I really can't wait to see what's happening when the singers are there.
Can I just mention, you guys may not know this, Merwin was in the Avengers movie. Right.
Oh no!
He was one of the string quartet that plays, and if you've seen it,
yes.
when Loki comes in and causes havoc. So Merwin has some experience with this,
in running around with chaos. Yeah. But it is. But I think there is one of the things is that so many elements do need to come together, and I think that being part of the orchestra, you just have this peripheral sense that there's so many moving parts and that all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this aria is in a different key. That's great. There must have been a really good reason for that. Let's fix that up.
Douglas has left the room now. He's still here. It's okay.
But it has to be different than waiting for the cello to show up and perform the solo line, or waiting for the violin to show up and perform the violin part. There, because you have lights and you have sets and you have dancing.
Yep.
And I think that one of the most important things for an orchestra musician in a pit is to not be distracted by all of those things.
That's why they put you in the back. We
learn really quickly to have this sort of twofold focus, one eye on the conductor, one eye on the score, and that's you try to ignore the fact that the composer, who you now know as a contract attorney, is like 6 feet behind you taking copious notes. You really want to know, you want to just stay focused.
So if you hear something you don't like, do you shout objection?
Not those are not the words I use.
What do they say in the UK?
They say many things, but probably most of them aren't good for air.
That's all right. I do have a little beep here I can use. Well, let's get on some more serious ground here, because this is an opera that deals with a very important message, and it deals with Martin Luther King Jr., and we haven't said it yet, but this is coming about at the 50th anniversary of his assassination, almost to the very day, right, that this is happening. And can you talk a little bit, Doug, about your hopes for this opera and what you want people to take away from it, and the message that you think is important, that so many moving parts are coming together to create this experience? What would you say?
This tries to tell such a serious story. I was watching a documentary on television last night, and it reminded me how serious the 1950s and 1960s were in this country, and the issues that the country faced at the time. And yes, I say we. I haven't been here that long. America has come a long way since then. But there are still issues. And the thing I've tried to focus on in this piece is one aspect of what became known as the Civil Rights Movement. There were many other aspects. There were more violent aspects. But that Dr. King followed a path of nonviolence is the most amazing thing to me, and that's the story I've tried to tell. I've tried to call that love, because that's a word and a concept that I think we can get our minds around, and the thought of not retaliating, of putting yourself willingly in harm's way in order that other people's lives may be better. And I was looking at one of the pledge cards that people who participated in the movement had to sign before they were able to march. This stuff is astonishing, and even watching some of that documentary last night, people who were, whether they were freedom riders or people who were otherwise participating in marches, adults and young people who were willingly risking their lives for what they believed in. They'd signed wills. They'd given wills in sealed envelopes to people before they got on the buses, before they started marches, saying that if in the event that I don't come back, mail this to someone. That is astonishing stuff. Yeah. And I sometimes it's easy to become a little blunt to history because it's presented to us in the same way through school curricula and through television programs and documentaries, a lot of them in black and white. And I'm hoping in some way to just get to people's hearts past their minds through this piece, and to reawaken or to cause them to think again or to look again at what they've known, and recognizing also that there are many people who have no idea what happened.
Right. Right.
Or think they know what happened, but most of all to move people
and to raise awareness.
Absolutely,
at the very least, to raise awareness of the life of Dr. King.
But terribly humbling to even think of having tried to do this.
Yeah. Do you feel a great responsibility, a weight of responsibility in creating this piece?
Yes, but last night watching the documentary, a sense of how is it even possible to encapsulate that in anything?
Well, you're creating a work of art. It's
Sure.
not a documentary.
True.
And your response to the story of Dr. King, from what I have seen and heard, is more visceral, more inner, and in that sense, it can reach people in a way that is completely different from just laying out the facts.
Absolutely.
Right? Would you agree with that, Carl?
Sure. This message that we're attempting to portray is a message that is a message of love. It's a message that I think has been overlooked to a certain extent, sort of blunted, as Douglas said, by what we've been instructed in history classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that I Dream Douglas has tried to focus on the aspect of how we are to, I mean, as corny as it may sound, how we should respect and love and each other. And I think that's what he's trying to say in the piece, and I think he's done a good job at it.
Yeah. Well, that message of love and respect, I mean, that's a perennial, human pursuit.
Absolutely.
And it takes many shapes and different forms.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Zach?
I just wanted to ask why we're here. Why is this Toledo? Why is this Toledo Opera? Why is this kicking off here? How did this happen to come to Toledo?
Through an introduction to James Mina, who is general director in Opera Carolina, who has a connection with Toledo, and maybe is he artistic director. And he heard the concept recording, and there are more rhythm and blues aspects, there are more operatic aspects, but he saw this as something that should be happening in opera houses. And we began in Grand Rapids with a concert performance, so no staging whatsoever, and just the rhythm section. But it was his sense that this was the place to begin it, and because the calendar meant that it was possible to do it in close proximity to the actual 50th anniversary of 4th April 1968, so that's why I think.
You mentioned April 4th, and of course this podcast is airing on April 4th on the radio, so just to put that out there, that if you're listening to us on FM 91 right now, today is the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. A sober event, to be sure, but I think that your opera, Douglas, certainly has a lot of celebration in it as well.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
May I just say something about the instrumentation of the opera, or what was represented on that particular example that you played, and what was not represented in terms of what's going to be on the stage. There are moments in the piece where there are solo singers with orchestra, which will basically be what that segment was that you played. Also involved is a rhythm and blues rhythm section, which will be actually 3 keyboards, piano, 2 other keyboards, electronic keyboards, guitar, mostly electric guitar, some acoustic guitar, bass, electric bass, and drums, and there's a chorus as well as the 5-6 principal singers.
Yeah.
So it's a full stage. It's a lot of fun, and there are moments where it's just rhythm section, and some saxophones and horns and R&B and
Just don't forget the Hammond B3.
Oh, right, and Hammond B3s, which I might just say when you asked me about orchestration. The Hammond B3 was a staple in churches, and in black churches.
When you think of gospel music and you think of the typical riffs on the organ and the singing, that's the Hammond.
That organ more often than not is a B3 or some derivative of a B3 that was made by the Hammond Corporation. It was not possible to not have the Hammond B3 in this piece of
Douglas, I think you chose the right man for the job.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, we're running out of time, and there's so many other things that we could talk about, and we didn't get to listen to any more of the music. But, the best alternative to that is to go listen to all of the music. The opera is opening on Friday evening, April 6th, 7:30 p.m., also Saturday at 7:30 p.m., and Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You can get your tickets at the Valentine Theater. Call up the box office, 419-255-SING. That's 419-255-7464. Or go online to ToledoOpera.org. Toledo Symphony Lab is generously underwritten by a gift from the estate of Barbara Garwood and is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of this program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab or subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts. My thanks to our regular panelists, Zach Vassar and Merwin Sue, and also special thanks to our guest today, composer and librettist Douglas Tappin, and orchestrator and musical director Carl Marsh, again, the artistic team behind the new opera I Dream, which is premiering in Toledo this weekend. I'm Brad Cresswell, and you've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab here on FM 91.